The storm had already taken the roof from one house down the street when Soraya heard the pounding at her door. Not a knock, something desperate. When she opened it, a bleeding man collapsed into her arms, whispering words she couldn't understand. Behind him, headlights cut through the rain and voices shouted his name like a death sentence. Her son froze in the corner, watching. Soraya had no food, no money, no safety left to give. But in that moment she made a choice that would pull her into a war of power, lies, and a truth the world had buried.
Where are you watching from, and what time is it there right now? If you love powerful emotional stories like this, don't forget to subscribe. You don't want to miss what happens next.
In a crowded, forgotten corner on the outskirts of Accra, where the city's shine faded into dust and broken concrete, Soraya Bello lived a life measured in survival, not dreams. Her home was a small wooden structure, patched together with rusted zinc sheets and stubborn hope. When the wind blew too hard, the walls whispered like they were about to give up. When it rained, water found its way inside, no matter how carefully she sealed the cracks. Every morning before sunrise, Soraya rose from her thin mat, her body already aching from the previous day's labor. She moved quietly, so as not to wake Malik, her 7-year-old son, curled beside his grandmother on the other side of the room. Mama Zainab's breathing was uneven, her chest rising and falling with effort. Illness had settled into her bones like a permanent guest one Soraya could not afford to send away. Soraya would kneel beside the small charcoal stove, lighting it with practiced hands, roasting plantains she had bought on credit from a supplier who had long stopped trusting her promises. The smell of the food would fill the cramped room, warm, comforting, and deceptive. It smelled like enough. It was never enough. By the time the sun rose, Soraya was already at the roadside, her tray balanced carefully, calling out to passing workers, drivers, and school children. Some days she sold everything. Most days she did not. Every unsold plantain was not just lost income. It was a reminder that effort did not always guarantee survival. Still, she smiled. She had learned that people were more willing to buy from a woman who looked like she still believed in something. That evening, the sky darkened earlier than usual. Heavy clouds rolled in, swallowing the last light, and a strong wind began to sweep through the narrow alleys of the neighborhood. Soraya packed up what little she had left and hurried home, her sandals slapping against the uneven ground. Inside, Malik ran to her immediately. "Mama, you're late," he said, his small voice edged with worry. "I know," she replied softly, brushing dust from his cheek. "The weather is angry today." Mama Zainab coughed from her corner, a deep, rattling sound that made Soraya's chest tighten. She moved quickly to her offering, the last of the herbal mixture she had prepared that morning. "We need proper medicine," Soraya murmured more to herself than anyone else. "With what money?" Mama Zainab replied weakly, though her eyes held no accusation, only acceptance. Soraya didn't answer. There were no answers left to give. Night fell quickly, and with it came the storm. Rain pounded against the roof like fists, loud and relentless. The wind howled through the cracks, forcing its way into the small room, carrying with it the smell of wet earth and something colder, something unsettled. Malik huddled closer to Soraya, his small hand gripping her dress. "I don't like this," he whispered. "It will pass," she said, though she wasn't sure she believed it. The storm grew stronger. Somewhere in the distance, something metallic crashed to the ground. A dog barked wildly, then went silent. The world outside felt chaotic, unpredictable, like it was unraveling. And then, through the roar of the storm, Soraya heard something else. A sound, not part of the rain, not the wind, a dragging movement, followed by a dull thud. She froze. At first she told herself it was nothing, something blown by the wind, a loose object, a stray animal. But then it came again, closer. Her heart began to pound each beat, louder than the last. Malik looked up at her, sensing the shift. "Mama?" he asked. "Stay here," she said quietly. She moved toward the door, her steps slow, cautious. Every instinct told her to ignore it, to stay inside, to protect what little she had left. But something else, something deeper, pulled her forward. She reached the door and hesitated, her hand resting on the worn wood. The storm raged outside, and for a moment she considered turning back. Then she opened it. The wind hit her immediately, rain soaking her clothes in seconds. At first she saw nothing, just darkness and movement. Then, near the edge of the narrow path beside her home, she saw a shape. A man. He was barely upright, leaning against the side of the structure, his body trembling under the weight of exhaustion and injury. Blood mixed with rainwater running down his arm and staining the ground beneath him. Before she could speak, he took one step toward her and collapsed. Soraya Malik's voice came from behind her, filled with fear. She turned sharply. "Stay inside." Her mind raced. This was not her problem. This was danger, clear, undeniable danger. In places like this, trouble did not come alone. It brought consequences. It brought attention. It brought destruction. She should close the door. She should pretend she saw nothing. She should protect her son. But the man lay there, unmoving, the storm threatening to wash him away, like he meant nothing. Soraya stepped forward. She knelt beside him, her hands trembling as she turned him slightly. His face was unfamiliar, but his condition was clear. He was barely alive. His lips moved, forming words she couldn't fully hear over the storm. "Please." It wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, but it was human. Soraya closed her eyes for a brief second, as if bracing herself against the weight of what she was about to do. Then she made her decision. "Malik," she called. "Help me." Her son hesitated only for a moment before running to her side. Together they struggled to lift the man, his body heavy and uncooperative. Every movement was difficult, every step a fight against the wind and rain. "Hurry!" Soraya urged, her voice tight with urgency. They dragged him inside, laying him gently on the floor. The small room suddenly felt even smaller, filled now with the presence of something unknown. Something dangerous. Soraya moved quickly, grabbing a cloth, trying to clean the blood from his arm. The wound was deep, too deep for anything she had. Mama Zainab watched silently, her expression unreadable. "Do you know who this is?" she finally asked. Soraya shook her head. "Then why bring him here?" Mama Zainab pressed. Soraya paused, her hands still. "I don't know," she admitted quietly. "But I couldn't leave him there." Outside, the storm continued to rage. But then through the noise, another sound emerged. Engines, multiple vehicles. Soraya's head snapped toward the door. Headlights flashed through the cracks in the wall, cutting across the room in sharp, blinding lines. Voices followed, loud, urgent, and searching. "They're looking for him," Mama Zainab whispered. Soraya's pulse spiked. For a brief moment, fear threatened to take over, to undo the choice she had just made. But then she looked at the man lying on her floor, and then at her son, and something inside her settled. "Blow out the lamp," she said. The room fell into darkness. Outside, the voices grew closer, and inside that fragile home, Soraya realized that her life had just changed in a way she could never take back. The darkness inside Soraya's home felt heavier than usual that night, not just because the lamp had been extinguished, but because fear had settled into every corner like a silent intruder. Outside, the vehicles had stopped. Their engines idled low like restrained beasts waiting for command. Headlights sliced through the thin gaps in the wooden walls, casting long shifting shadows across the room. Soraya could hear boots against wet ground. Voices sharp, controlled, purposeful. Not the kind of men who asked questions politely. Malik clung to her side, his small fingers gripping her dress so tightly it hurt. Soraya placed a steadying hand over his, pressing it gently, as if to remind him to stay still, to stay quiet. On the floor, the man Tunde, as he had called himself, barely moved. His breathing was shallow, uneven. At any moment he could groan shift, make a sound that would betray them all. Soraya swallowed hard. "Stay down," she whispered, though she wasn't sure if he could hear her. Mama Zainab sat upright. Despite her weakness, her eyes fixed on the door. She had lived long enough to recognize danger when it stood just outside. A loud knock shattered the fragile silence. Soraya's heart jumped into her throat. The knock came again, harder this time. "Open the door," a voice commanded from outside. Soraya didn't move. Another knock, louder, more aggressive. "We know someone came this way." Malik buried his face into her side, trembling. Soraya closed her eyes briefly, forcing herself to think. If she didn't open the door, they might break it down. If they came inside, her gaze flicked to Tunde. There was nowhere to hide him. No secret space, no escape, only risk. She exhaled slowly, then stood. "Stay here," she whispered to Malik and Mama Zainab. As she approached the door, she forced her face into something neutral, tired, ordinary, harmless. She opened it just a crack. Rain and light flooded in. A man stood at the front, tall and broad, his clothes dark and expensive despite the storm. Behind him were two others scanning the area with sharp, restless eyes. "Did you see a man pass through here?" the leader asked. Soraya blinked as if confused. "A man," she repeated. "Yes. Injured. Running." She shook her head slowly. "No. I've been inside. The storm." She gestured vaguely behind her. "I have a child. We don't go out in this weather." The man studied her, carefully. Too carefully. His eyes moved past her, trying to see inside the dim room. Soraya subtly shifted her body, blocking the view as much as possible. "You're sure?" he asked. Soraya nodded. "I'm sure." A long pause followed. Rain dripped from the edge of the roof. Somewhere nearby, a metal sheet clanged in the wind. The man stepped closer. For a moment, Soraya thought he might push past her. But then he stopped. "If you see anything," he said quietly, "you will report it." It wasn't a suggestion. Soraya forced a small nod. "Yes." He held her gaze for one last second, then turned away. The others followed. The engines roared back to life, and slowly, the vehicles pulled away, disappearing into the storm. Soraya didn't close the door immediately. She stood there listening, waiting, making sure they were truly gone. Only then did she shut it, her hands trembling as she secured the latch. The room remained silent for a few seconds longer. Then Malik let out a shaky breath. "They almost saw him," he whispered. Soraya turned back, her chest still rising and falling too quickly. "Yes," she said softly. "They almost did." She moved quickly to Tunde's side again. His skin felt colder now, his body weaker. The little strength he had left was fading. "He won't survive the night like this," Mama Zainab said quietly. Soraya didn't respond immediately. She already knew. She reached for a clean piece of cloth and began to tend to his wound again, this time more urgently. The blood had slowed, but not enough. The injury needed proper care, stitches. Medicine, something beyond what she had. "We need help," she said under her breath. "And where will you get that?" Mama Zainab asked. "If you take him to a clinic, those men will find him." Soraya's hands paused. The truth pressed heavily against her. There was no safe option, only choices between danger and greater danger. Tunde stirred suddenly, his eyes flickering open. For a moment, they were unfocused, distant. Then they landed on Soraya. "You," he murmured weakly. "You're safe for now," she said, though the words felt fragile. His brow tightened as if trying to remember something urgent. "They're still looking," he whispered. "I know. You shouldn't have brought me here." Soraya met his gaze. "I couldn't leave you to die," she said simply. Something shifted in his expression. Surprise, maybe, or disbelief. People like him were not used to that kind of answer. Why, he asked. Soraya hesitated, because she didn't fully understand it herself, because something in her refused to let another human being disappear in the rain like they were nothing. But instead she said, "Rest. You need strength." His eyes lingered on her for a moment longer before closing again. Malik slowly approached, kneeling beside him. "Is he a bad man?" he asked quietly. Soraya looked at the unconscious stranger. "I don't know," she admitted. "Then why help him?" She took a breath. "Because sometimes," she said gently, "people need help before we know who they really are." Malik considered this, then nodded slowly. Outside, the storm began to weaken, the rain softening into a steady rhythm. But inside the house, tension remained stretched thin between uncertainty and fragile hope. Hours passed. Soraya did not sleep. She sat beside Tunde, checking his breathing, wiping his forehead, adjusting the cloth on his wound. Each small action felt like a quiet battle against something larger than her understanding. Mama Zainab dozed lightly, her body too tired to stay awake. Malik eventually fell asleep, curled close to Soraya's side. And still, Soraya remained awake, watching, waiting, thinking. Who was this man? Why were powerful men hunting him in the middle of a storm? And what had she just brought into her home? By morning, the rain had stopped. The sky was pale, washed clean as if the storm had never happened. But Soraya knew better. Storms did not always end when the rain stopped. Sometimes they had only just begun. A few hours later, Tunde woke again. This time his eyes were clearer, more aware. He looked around the small room, taking in every detail: the cracked walls, the worn mat, the simple belongings. His gaze finally returned to Soraya. "You shouldn't trust me," he said quietly. Soraya raised an eyebrow. "That's an odd thing to say to someone who just saved your life." A faint, tired smile touched his lips, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You don't know what you're getting into." Soraya leaned back slightly, studying him now with more intention. "Then tell me," she said. He hesitated. Something guarded passed over his face. "I can't." Soraya exhaled. "Then I'll decide for myself." A silence followed. Then she added more firmly this time. "But understand this: if your trouble brings danger to my son, you will leave, no matter what." Tunde held her gaze. For the first time, there was something like respect in his eyes. "That's fair," he said. Soraya nodded once, but deep inside she felt something uneasy, because even without knowing his full story, she could already tell this man's trouble was not something that would simply leave. Morning in Soraya's neighborhood did not come gently. It arrived with noise vendors shouting, metal pots clanging, distant radios crackling with news, and the restless movement of people who could not afford to be still. Life, no matter how fragile, pushed forward. Inside the small wooden house, however, everything felt suspended. Soraya had not gone to the roadside that morning. For the first time in months, her tray of plantains remained untouched in the corner, the fruit slowly ripening past its prime. It was a dangerous choice. One day without selling meant one day closer to hunger. But she could not leave. Not with a wounded stranger lying on her floor. Not with men searching. Not with questions that refused to leave her mind. Tunde sat, propped against the wall, his back supported by a folded cloth. He looked stronger than the night before, but the strength was deceptive. His movements were careful, controlled, like someone holding himself together through discipline alone. Soraya knelt nearby, grinding herbs into a rough paste, using a small stone. The smell was bitter sharp. "This will help slow the infection," she said without looking at him. "You've done enough already," Tunde replied quietly. She didn't answer immediately. She simply finished her work, then moved closer and began applying the paste to his wound. He winced, his jaw tightening, but he didn't pull away. "You're not from here," she said suddenly. It wasn't a question. Tunde gave a faint exhale. "Is it that obvious?" Soraya glanced at him briefly. "You speak differently. You carry yourself differently. Even the way you sit. It's not someone who has lived like this." Tunde looked down at his hands, now dirtied and rougher than they had likely ever been. "No," he admitted. "I haven't." Malik watched from across the room, his eyes wide with quiet curiosity. He had never seen a man like this. Someone who didn't belong yet was now part of their small world. "Were you rich?" Malik asked bluntly. Soraya shot him a look. "Malik." "It's okay," Tunde said, stopping her. He looked at the boy. "Yes," he said simply. "I was." Malik's eyes widened further. "Then why are you here?" Tunde didn't answer right away, because the truth was not simple and not safe. "Things changed," he said finally. Malik frowned, unsatisfied, but sensing that pressing further might not bring answers. Soraya finished dressing the wound and sat back. "You should rest," she said. "I've rested enough," Tunde replied. "I need to leave." The words came too quickly, too decisively. Soraya's expression hardened slightly. "You can barely stand," she said. "If you step outside now, you won't make it far." "I can't stay here," he insisted. "It's not safe for you." Soraya let out a quiet breath. "Do you think I don't know that?" she asked. A silence followed. "Yes," she continued, her voice calm but firm. "You bring danger. Trouble follows you. Men with power are looking for you." She met his eyes directly. "But I already made my choice." Tunde held her gaze. "Why?" he asked again, more quietly this time. Soraya leaned back slightly, her arms resting on her knees. "Because I know what it means to be left with nothing," she said. "And I won't become the kind of person who turns away when someone else is about to lose everything too." Her words settled between them. Not dramatic, not loud, but undeniable. Tunde looked away, something unreadable crossing his face. Across the room, Mama Zainab shifted slightly, her weak voice breaking the moment. "Kindness has a cost," she said. Soraya turned toward her. "I know." Mama Zainab studied Tunde with quiet intensity. "And some people bring more cost than others." Tunde did not respond, because she was not wrong. Later that day, Soraya stepped outside briefly to collect water. The air was heavy, still damp from the storm. The ground was muddy footprints marking the movement of people who had passed through earlier. As she approached the communal tap, she noticed something different. People were watching her, not openly, not directly, but enough. Two women who usually greeted her turned away quickly. A man standing nearby lowered his voice when she approached his conversation, cutting off a mid-sentence. Soraya felt it immediately. The shift. Something had changed. When she returned home, her steps were quicker, her thoughts more alert. Inside, she found Tunde sitting up straighter, his attention focused on something outside the small window. "What is it?" she asked. "People are asking questions," he said. Soraya frowned. "I noticed. They'll keep asking," he continued, "and eventually, someone will answer." She set the water down. "Then we don't give them anything to find." Tunde looked at her, surprised by the firmness in her tone. "You're stronger than you look," he said. Soraya almost smiled. I don't have a choice. That evening, as the sun dipped low and the neighborhood settled into its usual rhythm, Soraya prepared a small meal. It was not much, just enough for them to share. She handed a portion to Tunde. He hesitated, then took it. Thank you, he said quietly. They ate in silence at first. Then Malik spoke. Will you leave tomorrow? He asked. Tunde looked at the boy. I don't know, he admitted. Malik nodded slowly. You can stay, he said after a moment. But you have to help. Soraya raised an eyebrow. Help, Malik pointed at the broken stool in the corner. That, he said. For a brief moment, something almost normal passed through the room. Tunde let out a soft, unexpected laugh. I think I can manage that. And the next morning he did. With careful movements and limited strength, he repaired the stool, using what little tools Soraya had. It was a small thing, insignificant in the larger world. But inside that home, it mattered. Malik watched him closely, admiration beginning to replace curiosity. Soraya watched too. Not just what he did, but how he did it. There was no arrogance, no entitlement, just quiet focus. Later, as he sat back catching his breath, Soraya spoke. You don't act like someone who has lost everything, she said. Tunde looked at her. That's because I haven't allowed myself to think that way, he replied. Why, because if I do, he said softly, then I won't get it back. Soraya studied him, and for the first time, she saw not just a man in danger, but a man with purpose. Still, something remained unsettled. Whatever you're running from, she said, it's not over. Tunde nodded. I know, and when it comes here again, she continued, we may not be able to stop it. A pause. Then Tunde spoke, his voice quieter than before. Then we face it, he said. Soraya didn't respond immediately, because facing something like that was not the same as surviving it. Outside, the night deepened, and somewhere in the distance, far beyond the quiet streets of their neighborhood, decisions were being made. Plans were forming, and slowly, inevitably, the world Tunde had tried to escape was finding its way back to him. By the third day after the storm, the air in Soraya's neighborhood had changed in a way that no one could quite explain, but everyone could feel. The market was louder than usual, not with joy but with restless talk. Soraya returned to her roadside stall that morning, forcing herself back into routine. She could not afford another day without income, no matter what danger sat quietly in her home. She arranged her plantains carefully, calling out to passing customers with the same practiced voice. But her attention was divided. Every passing face felt like a question. Every pause in conversation felt like suspicion. Across the road, a small radio crackled loudly from a wooden kiosk, drawing a crowd of men who leaned in, listening intently. The voice from the speaker was urgent, dramatic, too dramatic for ordinary news. Soraya tried to ignore it, until she heard a name. Tunde Adebayo. Her hands froze. The plantain she was holding slipped slightly in her grip. Former CEO of Adebayo Holdings, now declared a fugitive. The words seemed to echo, stretching unnaturally in her mind. Slowly, almost against her will, Soraya turned her head toward the radio. The announcer's voice continued each sentence, sharper than the last. Accused of large-scale fraud, embezzlement, and involvement in multiple suspicious deaths connected to corporate operations. A murmur spread through the crowd. Rich people, one man scoffed. Always the same story. They say he ran away before he could be arrested. Another added. Ran no, a third voice said darkly. Men like that don't run. They hide until they can escape. Soraya's heartbeat grew louder. Sources confirmed that Tunde Adebayo was last seen in the outskirts of Accra. A chill ran down her spine. The outskirts, her area. The radio continued. Anyone with information is urged to report immediately. A woman beside Soraya shook her head. These people bring trouble everywhere they go, she muttered. If he comes near here, I will report him myself. Soraya forced her face to remain neutral. But inside, everything shifted. Because now she knew the man in her home was not just someone in trouble. He was the center of it. The rest of the morning passed in a blur. Soraya sold what she could, her movements automatic, her thoughts racing far ahead of her actions. Fraud, murder, fugitive. The words repeated in her mind, each one heavier than the last. By midday she packed up early. She couldn't stay out there any longer, not with this knowledge burning inside her. When she reached home, Malik ran to her as usual, but she barely registered his voice. Her eyes went straight to Tunda. He was sitting near the doorway, repairing a small crack in the wooden frame. He looked up as she entered, and in that moment, she saw it. Not the wound, not the exhaustion, but recognition. The face from the radio, the man the city was talking about. Tunde Adebayo, she said slowly. The room went still. Malik looked between them, confused. Mama Zainab's eyes sharpened immediately. Tunde didn't speak. He didn't deny it. He didn't pretend. He simply held Soraya's gaze. And that was enough. You lied, Soraya said, her voice quiet but not weak. I didn't tell you everything, he replied. That is the same thing, she shot back. A tense silence filled the room. Malik stepped back slightly, sensing something serious unfolding. Soraya took a step closer, her expression tightening. They are saying you are a criminal, she continued. A thief, a killer. Each word felt heavier as she spoke it. Tunde inhaled slowly. I know what they are saying. And is it true, she demanded. The question hung in the air, unavoidable. Tunde looked down briefly, then back at her. No, he said. Just one word. But Soraya didn't move. Then why are they saying it? She pressed. Because someone needs me to disappear, he replied. That is not an answer. It's the truth. Soraya shook her head, frustration rising. You brought danger into my home, she said. Men with guns came here. People are watching me. And now I find out you are the man everyone is searching for. Her voice didn't rise, but the weight behind it did. I didn't ask you to hide me, Tunde said quietly. Soraya let out a sharp breath. No, she said. You didn't. Another silence. Then Mama Zainab spoke. This is not our fight, she said firmly. Whatever his problems are, they belong to his world, not ours. Tunde lowered his gaze. She was right. Soraya stood there, her thoughts colliding. Everything inside her told her to end it, to send him away, to protect her son, her home, her life. But something held her back. Not trust, not yet, but doubt. Because when she looked at him, she didn't see a man who had done the things they were saying. She saw someone hunted, someone tired, someone carrying something heavier than fear. Say it. Clearly, Soraya said, her voice steady again. Are you innocent? Tunde met her eyes fully this time. Yes. There was no hesitation, no wavering, just certainty. Soraya studied him for a long moment. Then she asked the question that mattered most. Then why are they trying to kill you? Tunde's jaw tightened slightly. Because this was the part he couldn't hide forever. Because I found something, he said slowly. What something inside my own company, he continued. Something they didn't want exposed. Who is they? A pause. Then my cousin Tunde said, Kunle Adebayo. The name meant nothing to Soraya. But the way he said it, that meant everything. He controls the board. Naku, Tunde continued. The money, the narrative, everything. And you, Soraya asked. I became the problem, he replied. The simplicity of his words made them more unsettling, and the accusations she pressed. The crimes fabricated, he said, or twisted enough to look real. Soraya crossed her arms slightly, her mind still working. "And you expect me to believe this?" she asked. "I expect you to decide for yourself," he replied. Another silence fell, this one heavier than before. Because now, the truth was not hidden, it was standing in front of her. And it demanded a choice. Malik spoke softly from the side. "Mama, is he bad?" Soraya didn't answer immediately, because she didn't know, not completely, but she did know one thing. If what Tunde said was true, then the danger wasn't just coming from him, it was coming for him, and anyone near him. She turned back to him. "You should have told me," she said. "I know, earlier, I know." Her expression softened slightly, but only slightly. "You don't get to hide behind silence anymore," she said firmly. "Not here." Tunde nodded once. Understood. Soraya looked at him one last time. Then she turned away, moving toward the small stove. "We will talk more tonight," she said. "When Malik is asleep." Tunde didn't respond, but he understood. Because whatever happened next would decide everything. Outside, the neighborhood buzzed with rumors. Inside, the truth had finally entered the room, and nothing would be the same again. That night, the neighborhood did not sleep easily. Voices lingered longer outside. Radios stayed on past their usual hours. Doors opened and closed with more caution than before. The news about Tunde Adebayo had spread like dry fire through narrow streets carried by whispers, suspicion, and fear. Inside Soraya's home, the air felt tight. Malik had fallen asleep early. His small body curled on the mat, unaware that the world around him had shifted into something more dangerous than he could understand. Mama Zainab lay beside him, her breathing shallow but steady. Only Soraya and Tunde remained awake. A single dim lamp flickered between them, casting soft shadows against the worn wooden walls. Outside, the night was quiet but not peaceful. It was the kind of quiet that came after something had already begun. Soraya sat across from Tunde, her posture firm, her eyes focused. "This is where you tell me everything," she said. Her voice was calm, but there was no softness in it. Tunde leaned back slightly, his expression unreadable for a moment. Then he exhaled slowly, as if releasing something he had been holding for too long. "I used to believe I was in control," he began. Soraya didn't interrupt. "I built Adebayo Holdings into something powerful," he continued. "We had influence across industries, construction, logistics, mining. People respected me. Some feared me. But I thought, as long as I kept things clean, as long as I followed the rules, none of that mattered." He paused briefly. "I was wrong." Soraya watched him closely. "What did you find?" she asked. Tunde's jaw tightened. "At first it was small," he said. "Numbers that didn't match, payments that had no clear purpose. I assumed it was accounting error, negligence, and it wasn't rapport." His voice hardened slightly. "It was intentional." Soraya leaned forward just a little. "Who was doing it?" Tunde hesitated, then answered, "Kunle." The name settled heavily in the room. "My cousin," Tunde continued. "He joined the board years ago. Smart, calculated, always thinking ahead. I trusted him." A bitter pause followed. "I shouldn't have." "What was he doing?" Soraya pressed. "Moving money," Tunde said, quietly, "through shell companies, redirecting funds meant for development projects, roads, housing, infrastructure." To where Tunde met her eyes, into private accounts, offshore, hidden. Soraya's expression darkened. "So, he was stealing," she said. "Yes," Tunde replied, "but that alone doesn't explain this." She added, gesturing vaguely toward him, toward everything. "People don't send men with guns just for money." Tunde's gaze shifted slightly. There was more, he said. A silence stretched between them. Then he continued. Some of the projects, they weren't just financial. Soraya didn't speak. She waited. Mining operations, Tunda said quietly, in rural areas. Land taken from communities with false agreements, workers underpaid, safety ignored. His voice dropped further. And when people spoke up, he didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Soraya's stomach tightened. They were silenced, she said. Tunde nodded once. The lamp flickered again, and suddenly the small room felt colder. You're telling me, Soraya said slowly, that your company, your name was connected to all of this, yes? And you didn't know? I didn't want to believe it, Tunde admitted. The honesty in his voice made the words land harder. When I started digging deeper, he continued. Kunle noticed. He moved faster, covered tracks, turned people against me. How, Soraya asked. By controlling the narrative, Tunde said. He had allies on the board, people who benefited from the same system. It wasn't just him. Soraya frowned. So you were surrounded? Yes. And you didn't leave? Tunde gave a faint, humorless smile. I thought I could fix it from inside. Soraya shook her head slightly. That's not how power works, she said. I know that now. Another pause. Then Soraya asked the question that had been building in her mind since morning. The accusations, she said. Fraud. Murder. All of it. Was that him too? Tunde's eyes hardened. Yes. How he created evidence. Tunde replied. Manipulated records. Redirected transactions into accounts linked to me. Used incidents from the mining sites and attached my name to them. Soraya felt a quiet anger rising. And people believed it. Tunde gave a short nod. They needed someone to blame, he said, and I was the perfect target, the public face, the one everyone recognized. And the board, they turned on me. Soraya let out a slow breath. So they erased you, she said. Not just erased, Tunde replied. They tried to kill me. The words hung in the air, heavy, unavoidable. Soraya's eyes narrowed slightly. What happened? Tunde leaned forward, resting his arms on his knees. They arranged a meeting, he said. Said we needed to resolve things quietly. No media, no attention. And you went. Yes. Soraya's expression tightened. You trusted them. I thought I could still reason with them, he admitted. And instead, Tunde's voice lowered. The car I was in, it didn't make it far. Soraya's breath caught slightly. They forced it off the road, he continued. Into a ditch, deep enough to finish the job. But it didn't, she said. Tunde shook his head. I got out before it went over completely. Injured, but alive. And then you ran. Yes. Soraya leaned back slowly. Everything he said painted a picture. Not of a man escaping justice, but of a man escaping execution. And the men who came here, she asked. Not police, Tunde said. Not law. Then who? Private security, he replied. Hired, loyal to Kunle. Soraya was silent for a long moment. Then she spoke again, her voice quieter now. If what you're saying is true. Tunde looked at her. Then this is bigger than you, she finished. It always was, he said. The room fell into silence again, but this time it was different, because now Soraya understood the scale. This wasn't just one man's story. It was corruption, power, lives destroyed far beyond what she could see. She thought of the people in the market, the stories she had heard over the years. Land taken, jobs lost, families broken, and suddenly, it all felt connected. You should go to the police, she said after a while. Tunde shook his head immediately. They're already compromised, he said. Kunle made sure of that. Then what do you do? Tunde looked down briefly. Survive long enough to prove the truth, he said. Soraya frowned. How? I don't know yet. That answer unsettled her more than anything else, because it meant there was no plan, only hope, and hope she had learned was not always enough. She stood slowly. "You brought a war into my home," she said. Tunde didn't argue, because he couldn't, but now I understand it. She continued. A pause. Then she added, "That doesn't mean I'm not afraid." Her voice was honest, unprotected. "I know," Tunde said. Soraya looked at him one last time. "Tomorrow," she said, "we decide what happens next." Tunde nodded, because the truth had been spoken, and now there was no going back. Outside, the night stretched on, but somewhere beyond the darkness, the consequences of that truth were already moving closer. Morning came with a thin, unforgiving light that exposed everything Soraya wished she could hide. The cracks in the wall, the nearly empty basket of plantains, the small bottle of medicine for Mama Zainab, now almost dry, and the man sitting quietly in the corner, calm on the outside but carrying a storm that refused to leave. Soraya stepped outside early, her head wrapped tightly in a faded scarf, her tray balanced on her hip. She needed to work. She needed to pretend that life was still normal. But the moment she reached the roadside, she knew it wasn't. Two young men stood near her usual spot, talking in low voices. They stopped when they saw her, not in a friendly way, not with curiosity, with awareness. "Morning," Soraya said carefully, forcing a small smile. They nodded, but didn't reply. She set down her tray, arranging her plantains with steady hands. Her movements were practiced, controlled, but inside, something was tightening. People were watching, not everyone, but enough. Customers came, but fewer than usual. Some who normally greeted her passed by without stopping. Others bought quickly and left without a word. And then around mid-morning, her neighbor Ajoa, a woman who had lived 2 houses down for years, approached. Ajoa didn't smile. She didn't greet. She simply stood there, arms folded. "People are talking," she said. Soraya kept her hands busy, not looking up. "People always talk," she replied. "Not like this," Ajoa said. That made Soraya pause. She slowly lifted her eyes. Ajoa leaned closer, lowering her voice. "They say strangers were seen near your house during the storm," she continued. "Men with cars, expensive ones." Soraya said nothing. "They say those men were asking questions," Ajoa added. A silence stretched between them. Then Ajoa asked more directly, "Is there someone in your house?" Soraya's heartbeat quickened, but her face remained calm. "No," she said. Ajoa studied her, longer than necessary. Then she straightened. "You should be careful," she said quietly. "This place, it doesn't protect people who attract attention." She turned and walked away, leaving Soraya with a truth she already knew. The walls around her life were starting to crack. By midday, Soraya packed up again, earlier than usual. There was no point staying, not today, not when every glance felt like a question she couldn't answer. When she returned home, Malik ran to her again, but this time she saw the worry in his eyes. "Mama," he said, "someone came." Soraya froze. "Who?" she asked sharply. Malik shook his head. "I don't know. They didn't come inside. They just stood outside and looked." Her chest tightened. "How long?" "A few minutes," he said. Then they left. Soraya turned toward Tunde immediately. He was already watching her. "I told you," he said quietly. "It's spreading." Soraya set her tray down harder than she intended. "Then what do we do?" she asked, her voice edged with frustration. Tunde didn't answer right away, because the truth was, there was no easy answer. Before he could speak, Mama Zainab coughed sharply from her corner, her body trembling with the effort. Soraya rushed to her side, concern replacing everything else. "Easy, easy," she murmured, supporting her gently. Mama Zainab's breathing was worse than before. The little medicine Soraya had was gone. And now, there was no money to replace it. Soraya closed her eyes briefly. Everything was collapsing at once: her work, her safety, her mother's health, and at the center of it all, Tunde. She stood slowly, turning toward him. "This is what I was afraid of," she said. Tunde didn't argue. "I know," he replied. "No," Soraya continued, her voice tightening. "You don't know. This is my life. This is everything I have, and it's falling apart." Her words weren't loud, but they were heavy. Tunde looked at her, something like guilt passing through his expression. "I didn't want this for you," he said. "But it's here," she replied. Silence followed. Then Malik spoke again, his voice small. "Mama, are we in trouble?" Soraya's heart ached. She knelt in front of him, placing her hands on his shoulders. "No," she said softly. "We're just going through something difficult." Malik frowned. Because of him, he asked, glancing at Tunde. Soraya hesitated, and that hesitation said everything. Malik looked down. "I don't want you to be hurt," he said quietly. Soraya pulled him into a gentle embrace. "I won't let that happen," she whispered. But even as she said it, she wasn't sure if she could keep that promise. That evening, things got worse. Soraya stepped outside to throw away waste, only to find her small wooden stall destroyed. The planks had been kicked in, the support frame broken, her tray splintered, plantains scattered and crushed into the dirt. For a moment she just stood there, staring, not moving, because this was not random. This was a message, a warning. Behind her, Malik gasped softly. "Mama!" Soraya didn't respond. Her hands clenched slowly at her sides. When she finally turned back inside, her face had changed. The softness was gone, replaced by something harder, something heavier. Tunde saw it immediately. "They've started," he said quietly. Soraya nodded once. "Yes." Another silence. Then she spoke. "You need to leave." The words came out clearly, firmly, without hesitation. Tunde didn't react immediately, because he had expected this. "I understand," he said. Soraya held his gaze. "I didn't say it lightly," she added, "but I can't lose everything." "I know." Malik looked between them, confusion and fear rising again, but he started. Soraya raised a hand gently. "It's not your decision," she said softly. Malik fell silent. Tunde slowly stood, despite the pain still lingering in his body. "I'll go tonight," he said. Soraya nodded. It was the right decision, the only decision, and yet something inside her felt unsettled. Because deep down, she knew this wouldn't end just because he left. The kind of trouble he carried didn't simply walk away. Still she turned away, focusing on what she could control. "We leave before dawn," she said. "You go your way. We stay here." Tunde hesitated, or he said carefully, "You come with me." Soraya turned back sharply. "No, it's not safe here anymore," he continued. "And it's not safe with you," she replied immediately. Another silence. Then Mama Zainab spoke weakly. "Sometimes, safety is not a place." Both of them looked at her. "It's a choice," she finished. The room fell quiet again, because those words carried more truth than either of them wanted to admit. Outside, the night deepened. Inside, a decision had been made, but whether it would protect them or push them further into danger was something none of them could yet see. That night, no one truly slept. Soraya lay on her mat with her eyes open, listening to every sound outside: the distant hum of engines, the occasional bark of a stray dog, the soft rustle of wind brushing against the fragile walls. Each noise felt amplified, as if the world itself was leaning in, waiting for something to happen. Beside her, Malik shifted in his sleep, restless. Mama Zainab's breathing was uneven again, weaker than it had been the night before. Across the room, Tunde sat with his back against the wall, awake, silent, thinking. The decision had been made. He would leave before dawn, and Soraya would stay. It was simple, it was logical, it was the safest choice, but something about it didn't feel complete. Because deep down, Soraya knew the danger had already crossed the threshold of her life, and it would not simply leave. Because he did. Before the sky began to lighten, Tunde stood slowly, careful, not to wake the others. He gathered what little strength he had left, adjusting the cloth around his wound. The pain was still there, sharp and persistent, but manageable. He moved toward the door, then paused. For a moment, he simply stood there looking back at the small room. At Malik, at Mama Zainab, at Soraya. A life he had stepped into by accident, but one that had already changed him more than he expected. Soraya's voice broke the silence. "You're leaving, without saying goodbye." Tunde turned. She was sitting up now, watching him. "I didn't want to wake them," he said quietly. Soraya stood. "I'm awake." A brief silence passed between them. Then she stepped closer. "You should go before the sun rises," she said. "Fewer people will see you." Tunde nodded, but he didn't move. "Thank you," he said instead. Soraya didn't respond immediately, because gratitude felt too small for what had happened. "Just go," she said softly. Tunde hesitated for one last second, then opened the door. Cool air slipped into the room, carrying with it the quiet stillness of early morning. He stepped out and disappeared into it. Soraya stood at the doorway long after he was gone, watching, listening, waiting, until there was nothing left to hear, nothing left to see. Only silence. She closed the door slowly, and for a brief moment she allowed herself to believe that it was over. But the morning proved otherwise. By mid-morning, the neighborhood was louder than usual again, not with normal activity, but with tension. 2 unfamiliar vehicles had been seen entering the area. People were gathering in small clusters, talking in low voices. And by the time Soraya stepped outside, she knew something was wrong. A man stood at the far end of the street, speaking to a group of locals. His clothes were too clean, his posture too controlled, his presence too deliberate. He wasn't from here, and he wasn't alone. Another man stood near the corner, watching, observing, waiting. Soraya's pulse quickened. They were still looking, and worse, they hadn't left. Her eyes moved instinctively toward the direction Tunde had gone. A quiet fear settled in her chest. Because if they were still searching, then he hadn't made it far enough. She turned back inside quickly. Mama Malik said, noticing her urgency. "What's wrong?" Soraya didn't answer immediately. She went to Mama Zainab, checking her condition, then looked back at Malik. "We may need to leave," she said. Malik's eyes widened. "Leave, yes." But where Soraya didn't know. That was the problem. There was nowhere safe. Before she could think further, a knock came at the door. Not loud, not aggressive, but deliberate. Soraya froze. Malik stepped back instinctively. Mama Zainab opened her eyes slowly. Another knock. Soraya moved toward the door carefully. "Who is it?" she asked. A pause. Then a woman's voice answered. "Someone who knows the truth." Soraya's grip tightened slightly on the door. Slowly, she opened it. A woman stood outside. Early 40s, composed, alert. Her eyes moved quickly, taking in everything without seeming to. She was dressed simply, but not poorly. There was confidence in her stance. "Purpose. Who are you?" Soraya asked. The woman stepped inside without waiting for permission. "My name is Nkechi Okafor," she said. Soraya shut the door quickly behind her. "What do you want?" she asked. Nkechi turned to face her fully. "I'm here because of him," she said. Soraya's expression hardened. "He's gone." Nkechi studied her carefully. "For your sake," she said, "I hope that's true." A silence followed. Then Soraya crossed her arms slightly. "Explain," she said. Nkechi nodded. "I worked with Tunde," she began. "Years. I was part of the internal audit team." Soraya's eyes narrowed. "Then you know what they're saying about him." "I know it's not true," Nkechi replied immediately. That answer came too fast to be rehearsed. Too certain to be uncertain. Soraya didn't speak, so Nkechi continued. What he found inside the company, she said, was only the surface. Soraya frowned. "What do you mean?" Nkechi stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Kunle's network is bigger than Tunde realized," she said. "It's not just money. It's land control, illegal extraction, political connections, things that reach far beyond one company." Soraya felt a slow tension building. "And you?" she asked. "Why are you here? Because Tunde is the only one who can expose it," Nkechi replied. "And you expect me to help you? I expect you to understand what you're already part of." Those words landed sharply. Soraya's jaw tightened. "I didn't choose this," she said. "No," Nkechi agreed. "But you made a choice when you helped him." A silence. Then Nkechi added, "And now they've marked you." Soraya's breath slowed, because she knew that part was true. Outside voices passed by the house, closer than before. Nkechi glanced toward the door. "They're tightening the search," she said. Soraya looked at her. "What do you want from me?" she asked again. Nkechi held her gaze. "Where did he go?" Soraya didn't answer. Couldn't. Because even if she wanted to, she didn't know. Nkechi studied her for a moment longer, then nodded slightly. "Good," she said. Soraya blinked. "Good." "Yes," Nkechi replied. "It means you didn't betray him." A pause. Then she added, "We'll need that." Soraya's expression hardened again. Nkechi didn't hesitate. "Yes," she said, "because whether you like it or not." Her voice lowered. "But this is no longer just his fight." The words hung in the air, heavy, unavoidable. Soraya stood still, because deep down she already knew. This was bigger than her home, bigger than her fear, bigger than anything she could walk away from. And somewhere out there, Tunde was still running. But the truth was catching up. And soon, so would everything else. For the rest of that morning, Soraya could not think clearly. Nkechi's words lingered in the air long after she stopped speaking, settling into the cracks of the small house like something permanent. "They've marked you." It wasn't said with fear. It was said with certainty. And certainty was always more dangerous. Nkechi did not stay long. She left as quietly as she had come, slipping back into the narrow street without drawing attention. But before she stepped out, she turned once more to Soraya. "If he finds a way to contact you," she said, "tell him this Adenta warehouse. He will understand." Soraya nodded slowly, though she wasn't sure if she would ever get the chance to pass the message. Then Nkechi was gone. The house felt emptier without her, but not safer. Malik sat in the corner watching his mother closely. He had stopped asking questions. Children often knew when answers would only bring more fear. Mama Zainab, however, did not remain silent. "That woman," she said weakly, "she carries trouble the same way he does." Soraya sighed softly. "I know, and now you are standing in the middle of it." Soraya didn't argue, because there was no argument left. By afternoon, hunger returned like an old enemy. Soraya had not worked properly in 2 days. The money she had saved, already small, was nearly gone. Mama Zainab needed medicine, Malik needed food. And now, even stepping outside felt like walking into a net slowly tightening around her. Still, she forced herself to act. I'm going to the market, she told Malik. Stay inside. Don't open the door for anyone. Malik nodded quickly. I won't. Soraya hesitated for a moment, then added, if anything feels wrong, you hide. Do you understand? Yes, Mama. She touched his head gently, then stepped outside. The walk to the market felt longer than usual. Every turn carried uncertainty. Every unfamiliar face made her pulse quicken. And when she finally arrived, the atmosphere felt different. Not loud, not busy, but tense. Conversations lowered when she passed. Eyes followed her movements. It wasn't open hostility, but it wasn't normal either. Soraya kept her head down, focusing on what she needed. She bought the cheapest food she could find, barely enough to stretch for the day, and turned to leave. That was when a voice stopped her. Soraya Bello. She froze. Slowly she turned. A man stood a few steps away. Well-dressed, clean, calm, too calm. I've been looking for you, he said. Soraya's instincts flared immediately. I don't know you, she replied. No, he said, but I know you. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. You helped someone recently. Soraya's chest tightened. I don't know what you're talking about. The man smiled slightly. Not kindly. Let's not waste time, he said. You're not a difficult woman to find. Soraya's grip tightened around the small bag she carried. Say what you want, she said. Then leave me alone. The man studied her for a moment, then nodded. Fair enough. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small envelope. Inside this, he said, is more money than you will make in months. Soraya didn't take it. What do you want? She asked. The man's expression didn't change. Information. Silence. Where is he? The man asked. Soraya shook her head immediately. I don't know. The man tilted his head slightly. Think carefully before you answer again, he said, because this is an opportunity. He held out the envelope. Your mother is sick, he continued. Your son is hungry. Your home is falling apart. Each word landed precisely, calculated. You're struggling, he added softly. And I can change that. Soraya felt something twist inside her, because everything he said was true. Just tell me where he went, the man said, and this is yours. No questions, no consequences. The envelope remained in his hand. Close, within reach. Soraya stared at it. For a moment, the world around her faded. She saw Mama Zainab struggling to breathe. Malik trying not to ask for food. Her broken stall, her empty pockets, her collapsing life. All of it, within reach of being fixed. All she had to do was speak. Her fingers twitched slightly. The temptation wasn't just real, it was overwhelming. The man noticed. See, he said quietly. You understand. Soraya lifted her eyes slowly, and for a brief second, something inside her wavered. Because she was tired, because she was afraid, because she had nothing left to give. But then she saw Malik's face in her mind. Not hungry, not afraid, but watching, learning. And she realized this wasn't just about survival. It was about who she was becoming. Soraya exhaled slowly, then stepped back. I don't know where he is, she said again. This time there was no hesitation. The man's smile faded slightly. That's unfortunate, he said. He lowered the envelope. You should think about your priorities, he added. Because people like him, they don't stay to suffer with people like you. Soraya said nothing. She simply turned and walked away. She didn't stop, didn't look back, didn't allow herself to hesitate. Not until she was far enough from the market. Not until her hands began to tremble. She stopped in a quiet corner, pressing her palm against the wall. Her breathing was uneven, her chest tight, because the choice she had just made had not been easy. It had cost something, something real, and she knew that the man would not simply forget. When she returned home, Malik ran to her again. "Mama." She knelt quickly, pulling him into her arms. "I'm here," she whispered. Mama Zainab watched quietly from the side. "He found you," she said. Soraya nodded. "Yes." And Soraya looked at her. I said nothing. Mama Zainab closed her eyes briefly. "Then be ready," she said. Soraya didn't ask for clarification, because she understood. That decision had consequences. Outside, the sky began to darken again, but this time there was no storm, only something worse. The quiet before something inevitable. And somewhere beyond the narrow streets of their neighborhood, the man who had offered her money was already making his next move. "Kate, tuk fan chin. Tiep tuk yeu, kau viaju mot nang hin. Jen mot nang hin. Hetram tu teokwi jin, fan, moi." The consequences arrived before nightfall. They did not come with thunder or warning, only with a silence that felt too deliberate to ignore. Soraya sensed it the moment she stepped outside to fetch water again. The street was quieter than usual. Not empty, but restrained. Conversations were shorter. Movements more cautious. People avoided eye contact in a way that was not accidental. They knew something, or they expected something. Soraya returned inside quickly, her instincts pressing against her chest like a warning drum. "Close the door," she told Malik. He obeyed without question. Mama Zainab shifted slightly on her mat, her eyes half open. "It's coming," she whispered. Soraya didn't ask what she meant, because she felt it too. The light outside began to fade, casting long shadows across the thin wooden walls. The air grew heavier, as if the entire neighborhood was holding its breath. Then, it happened. A sudden crash. The door burst open before Soraya could react. Two men pushed their way inside, followed by another behind them. Their presence filled the small room, instantly, heavy controlled and dangerous. Malik screamed. Soraya moved instinctively, pulling him behind her. "Stay back," she shouted. The men didn't respond. Their eyes scanned the room quickly, calculating, searching. "He's not here," one of them said. The leader stepped forward. The same man from the market. Calm, unhurried, but now without the mask of politeness. "You should have taken the offer," he said quietly. Soraya's heart pounded, but she stood her ground. "I told you I don't know where he is." The man studied her face, long enough to make the silence unbearable. Then he nodded slowly. "I believe you," he said. That answer caught her off guard. But before she could react, he gestured slightly. One of the men moved past her, straight toward Mama Zainab. "Don't touch her," Soraya shouted, stepping forward. Another man blocked her path instantly. Malik clung to her, trembling violently. "Please," Soraya said, her voice breaking now. "She's sick. She has nothing to do with this." The man from the market didn't raise his voice, didn't show anger, which made it worse. "Everything has something to do with this now," he said. Mama Zainab tried to sit up, her body too weak to move quickly. "Leave this house," she rasped. The man looked at her briefly, then looked back at Soraya. "People think silence protects them," he said. "It doesn't." Soraya's chest tightened. "What do you want?" she demanded. "I want him," the man replied. "I don't have him. Then you will remember where he went." "I don't know." The man sighed softly, then nodded again. "Very well." He turned slightly, and everything happened at once. One of the men knocked over the small table near the wall. Another kicked the storage crate, sending what little food Soraya had spilling across the floor. Malik cried out, "No!" Stop! Soraya tried to move, but the man blocking her didn't budge. Her entire world, what little she had left, was being torn apart in seconds. "Please!" she shouted again. "There's nothing here, that's the problem," the leader said calmly. "There's nothing." His gaze shifted to Malik, then back to Soraya. "And nothing is easy to destroy." The meaning hit her immediately. Cold. Clear. "No," she said, shaking her head. "No, don't." But he had already turned away. The men began to move out, leaving the house as suddenly as they had entered. Just before stepping outside, the leader paused at the doorway. "You had a chance," he said without looking back. "Next time, you won't." Then he left. The door swung loosely behind him, and silence crashed down in his absence. For a few seconds, no one moved. No one spoke. Then, Malik broke into sobs. "Mama!" Soraya dropped to her knees, pulling him into her arms. "It's okay," she whispered, though her voice shook. "It's okay." But it wasn't. Nothing about this was okay. Behind her, Mama Zainab coughed violently, her body struggling against the stress. Soraya turned quickly. "I'm here," she said, rushing to her side. Mama Zainab's breathing was worse now, faster, weaker. "We need medicine," Soraya murmured. But the truth was already clear. There was no money left, no safety, no time, and now, no illusion. Because the line had been crossed, this was no longer about threats. It was action. Real, immediate, and irreversible. Later that night, after Malik had cried himself to sleep, Soraya sat in the corner of the room, staring at the broken remains of her home. The overturned table, the scattered food, the damaged walls. It wasn't just destruction. It was a message, clearer than any words. "You are not safe." Her hands rested in her lap, clenched tightly. Her mind replayed everything. The market, the offer, her refusal, and now this. She had chosen, and this was the cost. A quiet sound broke her thoughts. "Mama Zainab, Soraya," she whispered weakly. Soraya moved closer immediately. "I'm here." Her mother's eyes were tired, but focused. "You cannot stay," she said. Soraya shook her head instinctively. "This is our home," No, Mama Zainab replied softly. "This is where they will come back." A silence followed, because Soraya knew she was right. "They will not stop," Mama Zainab continued. "Not until they get what they want." "And if I leave?" Soraya asked quietly. "They will follow," Mama Zainab said. "Then what do I do?" A pause. "Then you stop running alone." Soraya's brow tightened slightly. "What does that mean?" Mama Zainab looked toward the door. "Find him," she said. Soraya's breath caught. Tunde Mama Zainab nodded faintly. "You are already in this," she said. "Whether you accept it or not." Soraya looked away, because the truth was undeniable. She had tried to separate herself, to protect her world, but her world had already been pulled in. And now, there was no distance left, only direction. She stood slowly, her decision forming, not out of courage, but necessity. Malik stirred slightly in his sleep. Soraya looked at him, then back at the broken room, then toward the door. And for the first time, she understood something clearly. This was no longer about survival. It was about standing or being erased. Outside, the night stretched deep and silent, but somewhere beyond it, paths were crossing, choices were closing, and soon there would be no turning back. They left before the first call to prayer. Soraya did not pack much. There was nothing left to pack. A small cloth bag held the last of their food, a bottle of water, and Mama Zainab's nearly empty medicine. Malik carried a rolled mat clutched to his chest, like something that could anchor him to the only home he had known. Soraya paused at the doorway only once. The broken stool Tunde had fixed leaned against the wall, one leg uneven but holding. The table lay on its side. The floor still bore the marks of boots and spilled food. Everything looked smaller in the gray light before dawn, as if the house itself had already begun to forget them. "Come," Mama Zainab whispered. Soraya nodded and closed the door gently, not because it would keep anything out, but because leaving loudly felt like surrender. The path out of the neighborhood was narrow, muddy from the storm 2 nights before. The city was not yet awake, but it was not asleep either. Early workers moved like shadows, heads down, carrying loads heavier than their bodies suggested they could bear. Soraya walked with purpose, but without certainty. "Where are we going?" Malik asked quietly. Soraya glanced at him, then ahead. "A place where no one is looking for us," she said. It was not an answer. He accepted it anyway. They moved past the last cluster of homes into a stretch of open land where unfinished buildings stood like abandoned promises, concrete skeletons waiting for money that never came. One of those structures rose ahead, a half-built church, its walls up, but roof incomplete, iron rods exposed like ribs reaching for a sky that offered nothing. Soraya slowed. "Here," she said. They stepped inside. The air was cooler within the concrete frame. The ground was uneven, scattered with sand and broken blocks. At the far end, someone had left a wooden cross propped against the wall, unfinished like everything else. It was not safe, but it was out of sight. For now, that was enough. Malik set down the mat. Mama Zainab lowered herself carefully, wincing as she adjusted her position. Soraya moved quickly, clearing a small space, brushing away debris with her hands. "This will do," she said softly. Malik looked around. "It's big," he said. "Yes, and empty." Soraya nodded. "That's why we're here." They settled into a fragile quiet. Hours passed slowly. The sun rose, spilling light through the open sides of the structure. The city's noise remained distant, muffled by space and unfinished walls. For a moment, just a moment, it felt like they had escaped. But Soraya knew better. Escape was temporary. Reality always caught up. By midday, the heat crept in, pressing down on the open space. Mama Zainab's condition worsened again, her breathing shallow and irregular. Soraya knelt beside her, worry tightening in her chest. "We need medicine," she said. Mama Zainab shook her head, faintly. Later, she whispered, "Sit." Soraya hesitated, then obeyed. For a moment, they sat in silence, the weight of everything settling between them. "You're angry," Mama Zainab said. Soraya let out a small breath. "I'm tired," she replied. "That too." Another pause. Then Soraya spoke again, her voice lower now. "He said he didn't want this," she said. "That he didn't mean to bring it to us." Mama Zainab closed her eyes briefly. "And do you believe him?" Soraya didn't answer immediately. "I believe. He didn't expect it," she said finally. "But that doesn't change what it is." Mama Zainab nodded faintly. "No," she agreed. "It doesn't." A silence followed. Then, "Find him," Mama Zainab said again. Soraya's jaw tightened slightly. "And do what she asked. Stop standing in the middle," her mother replied. "Choose a side." Soraya looked away, because that was the part she had been avoiding. Choosing meant committing. Committing meant risk, but not choosing. That had already cost them everything. Across the space, Malik sat quietly, drawing shapes in the dust with a small stick. He didn't look up, but he was listening. Children always did. Soraya stood slowly. "I'll go out," she said. "Find food, information." Mama Zainab nodded. "Be careful." Soraya glanced at Malik. "Stay with your grandmother. Do not leave." Malik nodded quickly. "I won't." Soraya stepped out of the unfinished structure, her mind already shifting into focus. She didn't know where Tunde was, but she knew one thing: he would not go far. Not in his condition, not without help, and there was only one place he might try. Adenta, the word, echoed in her mind. The message Nkechi had left. A Denta warehouse. Soraya walked faster. The road stretched long ahead, dust rising with each step. She kept her head down, blending into the movement of the city as much as possible. Hours later, she reached the edge of a Denta. The area was different. Less crowded, more industrial. Large buildings stood behind tall fences. Trucks moved in and out, carrying goods, noise, and secrets. Soraya slowed. Her eyes scanned the surroundings carefully, looking, listening, waiting. And then she saw it. A warehouse. Old. Partially abandoned, but not empty. A faint movement near the side entrance. Soraya's pulse quickened. She moved closer, staying near the edge of the road, careful not to draw attention. Then she saw him. Tunde. He was sitting against the wall, his head lowered, his body slumped in exhaustion. He looked worse than before, paler, weaker, his movements, slower. For a moment, Soraya just stood there, watching him. Because this was the man who had changed everything, and now he looked like someone who had nothing left. She stepped forward. Tunde. He looked up sharply. Shock flashed across his face. Soraya. She crossed the distance between them quickly. "What are you doing here?" he asked. "You left," she said, "and everything got worse." He frowned slightly. "What happened?" "They came," she replied. "Your people, or his people." Tunde's expression hardened. "Are you hurt?" "No," she said, "but we won't be safe for long." A silence. Then Tunde looked away. "I told you to stay out of this," he said. Soraya let out a sharp breath. "That choice is gone," she replied. He didn't argue, because he knew she was right. "We're hiding in an unfinished church," she continued. "My mother is getting worse. Malik is scared. And I—" She paused, then finished. "I don't know what comes next." Tunde looked at her, really looked, and for the first time, he saw the full weight of what his world had done to hers. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. Soraya shook her head. "Sorry doesn't fix this." "I know." Another silence. Then she stepped closer. "So tell me, what does she said?" Tunde exhaled slowly. "There's evidence," he said. "Hidden, protected. Where not here," he replied. "Then where?" He hesitated, because saying it would change everything. But Soraya didn't step back, didn't hesitate. She stood there, waiting, and in that moment, Tunde understood something clearly. This was no longer about saving himself. It was about what came after, and who stood beside him. "We fight it," he said finally. Soraya held his gaze. "No," she corrected. "We end it." And for the first time since the storm, there was no uncertainty in her voice. Only direction. The word "end" stayed between them longer than either of them expected. It was not just a decision, it was a shift. Until that moment, everything had been about survival, running, hiding, reacting. But now for the first time there was intention, direction, and direction meant risk. Tunde pushed himself up slowly, using the wall for support. His body protested immediately, but he ignored it. Pain had become something familiar, something secondary to what mattered now. "If we're going to end this," he said quietly, "we need proof that can't be denied." Soraya crossed her arms, her eyes fixed on him. "You said there was evidence," she replied. "Where is it?" Tunde looked toward the warehouse behind him, then back at her. "Part of it is stored in secured company servers," he said. "But I knew those could be wiped once things turned against me." "So you made copies," Soraya said. "Yes," where Tunde hesitated again, but only briefly this time. "With someone I trusted," he said. "Someone outside the board's control." Soraya's brow tightened slightly. "Nkechi?" she asked. Tunde shook his head. "No, someone else." "Who, a former driver?" he said. Ibrahim Sadiq, the name hung in the air. Why him, Soraya asked. Because he wasn't part of the system, Tunde replied. He saw things, heard things, and more importantly, he wasn't visible enough to be targeted immediately. Soraya frowned. Wasn't. Tunde's silence answered that question. Where is he now? She pressed. I don't know, Tunde admitted. He was supposed to stay hidden until I contacted him. And you haven't. Tunde gave a short, humorless breath. I've been trying to stay alive. Soraya didn't respond, because she understood that, better than he expected. So we find him, she said. It won't be easy, Tunde replied. If Kunle's people suspect he has something, they'll be looking for him too. Then we find him first. The certainty in her voice made Tunde pause. You're serious, he said. Soraya held his gaze. I didn't come all this way to turn back now. A silence followed. Then Tunde nodded. All right. But before either of them could move, a voice came from behind. You're already too late. Both of them turned sharply. A man stood in the shadowed entrance of the warehouse, mid-30s, lean, alert. His clothes were worn but not poor. His eyes moved quickly, assessing both of them in seconds. Tunde stepped forward slightly. Ibrahim, he said. The man didn't move. You shouldn't have come here, Ibrahim replied. Relief flickered briefly across Tunde's face, but it was quickly replaced by concern. You're alive, Tunde said. For now, Ibrahim replied. Soraya stepped closer, studying him. You have the evidence, she asked directly. Ibrahim's eyes shifted to her. And you are, he asked. Soraya, she said. The reason he's still alive. Ibrahim held her gaze for a moment, then nodded slightly. That makes you a target, he said. I know, she replied. A brief silence. Then Tunde spoke again. Do you still have it? He asked. Ibrahim exhaled slowly. Yes, he said. But it's not safe anymore. Soraya's chest tightened. What do you mean? I moved it. Ibrahim continued. Twice, maybe 3 times. Every time I stayed in one place too long. Someone came asking questions. Tunde's expression darkened. They're tracking you. Yes. Then why come here? Soraya asked. Ibrahim gave a faint, tired smile. Because this was the last place you would think to look, he said. Tunde frowned, and now Ibrahim looked at both of them. Now you're here, he said, which means they'll come soon too. The weight of that settled immediately. How much time do we have? Soraya asked. Ibrahim shook his head. Not enough. A tense silence filled the space. Then Tunde spoke, his voice sharper now. Where is the evidence? Ibrahim hesitated, because saying it out loud made it real, made it vulnerable. But the situation had already moved beyond hesitation. In a storage unit, he said. Old transport yard near Tema. Soraya nodded slightly. That's not far, she said. It's not close either, Ibrahim replied. And it's watched. Tunde's jaw tightened. Of course it is. Soraya looked between them. Then we move now, she said. Not yet, Ibrahim said quickly. Why not? Because they're already ahead of us, he replied. A silence. Then he added, they took someone. Tunde's expression shifted instantly. Who? Ibrahim looked at him directly. Adwoa. Tunde's breath caught. Nkechi, Soraya asked. Ibrahim nodded. They picked her up yesterday, he said. Quietly, no noise, no attention. Tunde ran a hand over his face, tension building rapidly. That means they know, he said. Not everything, Ibrahim replied, but enough. Soraya's chest tightened. What will they do to her? She asked. Ibrahim didn't answer immediately, because they all knew. They'll pressure her, he said finally, for names, locations, anything she knows. Tunde shook his head. She won't talk. Everyone talks, Ibrahim said quietly. Eventually, the truth in those words hit harder than anything else. A long silence followed. Then Soraya spoke. "We don't have time to wait," she said. "If they break her, they'll come for us next Tunde finished." Ibrahim nodded. "Exactly." Soraya looked at both of them. "Then we move," she said again. This time neither of them argued, because now it wasn't just about evidence. It was about a race. Against time, against power, against people who did not lose. Tunde straightened slightly, forcing strength back into his body. "All right," he said. "We go to Tema." Ibrahim nodded. "I'll lead." Soraya took a breath, then added, "My family comes too." Tunde hesitated. "It's dangerous," he said. "They're already in danger," she replied. A pause. Then he nodded. "Okay." The decision was made. Fast, final, because there was no space left for doubt. Outside, the sky had begun to shift again, clouds gathering, not like the storm before, but something else, something slower, heavier, and as the three of them stepped out of the warehouse, moving toward a future none of them could fully see, one truth became clear. This was no longer about escaping, it was about confronting everything that had been hidden. And whatever waited at the end of that road would decide everything. The road to Tema stretched longer than any of them expected, not because of distance, but because every kilometer carried the weight of being watched. They moved in fragments, not together, not obviously connected. Ibrahim insisted on it the moment they left the warehouse. "We don't travel like a group," he said. "We arrive like strangers." So Soraya returned first to the unfinished church gathering Malik and Mama Zainab, with quiet urgency. There was no time to explain everything, only enough to say, "We're leaving again." Malik didn't ask why, this time. He simply held onto her hand, tighter. Mama Zainab, though weak, said nothing. Her silence had shifted from resistance to understanding. They walked part of the way, then took a crowded trotro heading toward Tema. Tunde boarded separately, 2 stops later. Ibrahim didn't board at all. He followed, watching, waiting, making sure no one followed too closely. The journey felt endless. Every stop brought new faces. Every glance felt like recognition. But no one spoke. No one pointed, no one acted, and that was worse. Because silence meant control, and control meant someone else was still ahead. By late afternoon, they reached the outskirts of Tema. The industrial zone stretched wide rows of warehouses, fenced yards, stacked containers, and roads lined with dust and movement. Trucks passed constantly, engines rumbling, carrying goods that no one questioned. It was the perfect place to hide something, or to bury it. Ibrahim met them near a broken fence at the edge of an old transport yard. "You made it," he said quietly. "For now," Tunde replied. Soraya adjusted the cloth around Mama Zainab's shoulders. "Where is it?" she asked. Ibrahim gestured toward the far end of the yard. "There," he said. A rusted structure stood behind a row of abandoned containers. It looked forgotten, unused, but something about it felt deliberate. "Storage Unit 17, Ibrahim added. Tunde nodded. "Let's move." They crossed the yard carefully, keeping close to the shadows of containers and broken walls. The ground was uneven, littered with scraps of metal and debris. Malik stayed close to Soraya, silent, watching everything, learning without asking. When they reached the structure, Ibrahim stepped forward first. He checked the door, still locked, still untouched, or so it seemed. He crouched slightly, inspecting the base. His expression tightened. "It's been opened," he said. Tunde's pulse quickened. "How long recently?" A silence fell. Then Soraya said quietly, "Then we don't have time." Ibrahim nodded. He reached into his pocket, pulling out a small key. Hands steady, breathing controlled. He unlocked the door, slowly. It creaked open. Inside, darkness, dust, and something else. Tension. Tunda stepped in first. Soraya followed. Then Malik. Then Mama Zainab supported carefully. Ibrahim entered last, closing the door behind them. The light filtered through small cracks in the walls, revealing a narrow space filled with stacked crates and old equipment. At the far end, a metal box, small, locked. Ibrahim walked straight toward it. "This is it," he said. Tunda moved closer, his breath tightening slightly. "Open it." Ibrahim knelt, unlocked it, lifted the lid. Inside fills, hard drives, documents, proof. Everything Tunda had risked his life for. Everything Kunle had tried to erase. For a moment, no one spoke. Because this was the turning point. Soraya stepped closer. "This can expose him?" she asked. Tunda nodded. "Yes, completely, yes." Her chest tightened. "Then we're not running anymore," she thought. Then, a sound. Outside, faint but clear, a vehicle, then another. Tunda's head snapped up. Ibrahim stood immediately. "They found us," he said. Soraya's pulse surged. "How no time?" Ibrahim replied. Outside doors slammed. Voices followed. Not loud, not chaotic, controlled, organized. They were here, and they knew exactly where to go. Tunda grabbed the box quickly. "We leave now," he said. Ibrahim shook his head. "No time to run," he said. "They've surrounded the yard." Soraya looked around. "There must be another way out." "There isn't," Ibrahim said. A heavy silence fell. Then the door burst open. Light flooded in, and with it, men, several, armed, precise. Behind them, Kunle Adebayo, calm, immaculate, untouched by everything that had happened. He stepped inside, slowly, his eyes moving across the room until they landed on Tunda. "Well," he said softly, "look who decided to stop running." Tunde's grip tightened on the box. Kunle's gaze shifted to Soraya, then to Malik, then to Mama Zainab. His expression didn't change, but something darker moved beneath it. "You brought witnesses," he said. Soraya stepped forward, instinctively placing herself between Malik and the men. Kunle noticed and smiled slightly. "Brave," he said, "or foolish." Tunde stepped forward. "This ends here," he said. Kunle tilted his head. "You still believe that Tunde lifted the box slightly?" "I have everything." Kunle's smile didn't fade. "No," he said. "You think you do." He stepped closer, unafraid, because he knew something they didn't. Truth, Kunle continued. "Calmly is not what you hold in your hands." He gestured lightly. "It's what people choose to believe." A silence. Then he added, "And I've already made sure they believe me." Soraya's chest tightened. "What does that mean?" she asked. Kunle's eyes moved to her. "You'll see." Then from outside, more movement. Footsteps, voices, different, louder, not controlled, not part of his men. Kunle's expression shifted, slightly. Then the door opened again, and this time, it wasn't his people. Journalists, cameras, voices rising. "What's happening here, Mr. Adebayo? What is this operation?" Kunle's calm cracked. "Just enough." Tunde turned sharply. "What?" Ibrahim exhaled. "I sent a message," he said quietly. "Before we came." Soraya looked at him. "You brought them here." Ibrahim nodded. "If this ends, it ends in the open." The room shifted instantly. Power changed, not completely, but enough. Kunle's control was no longer absolute. Cameras turned, lights flashed, questions filled the space. Tunda stepped forward, the box still in his hands. And for the first time, he wasn't running. He was standing, facing everything, and beside him, Soraya. No longer just a woman caught in the middle, but someone who had chosen and would not step back. The moment had come, and everything was about to break. For a brief second, the room held its breath. Cameras pointed in every direction. Microphones pushed forward. Voices overlapped, rising and clashing as journalists tried to make sense of what they had just walked into. And in the center of it all, two men stood facing each other. One had spent days running, the other had spent years controlling. Now, for the first time, they stood in the same space. Exposed. Tunde tightened his grip on the metal box, his breathing steady but his pulse sharp beneath it. Beside him, Soraya stood firm, her hand resting protectively near Malik, who clung to her side, wide-eyed but silent. Kunle's composure didn't disappear, but it shifted, subtly, the kind of shift only someone used to power could detect. Because this was not part of his plan. "You've made a mistake," Kunle said calmly, his voice cutting through the noise. Tunde didn't respond immediately. Instead, he stepped forward, into the light, into the attention. "I didn't come here to hide," he said. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried. And slowly, the noise began to quiet. Journalists turned toward him, cameras focused. "Because this was the story. You've all heard the accusations," Tunde continued. "Fraud, theft, murder." A pause. "Tonight, I answer them." Kunle's eyes narrowed slightly, but he didn't interrupt. Not yet. Tunde lifted the box slightly. "In here," he said, "are records, financial trails, signed documents, internal communications, evidence of illegal operations carried out under the authority of Adebayo Holdings." The room stirred, not loudly, but enough. "Operations that displaced communities," he continued, "exploited workers, and silenced those who tried to speak." Kunle let out a quiet breath, still composed, still controlled. "And you expect them to believe that?" he asked. Tunde met his gaze. "I don't expect," he said. "I show." He opened the box, removed a file, held it up. "This is a signed authorization," he said, "from Kunle Adebayo, approving land acquisition under false agreements in the northern region." Cameras zoomed in. Journalists leaned forward. Kunle's expression remained neutral. "Forgery," he said simply. Tunde didn't react. He pulled out another document. "Bank transfers," he continued. "Redirected funds from development budgets into offshore accounts." Kunle shook his head slightly. "Manipulated." Another file. "Internal reports," Tunde said. "Marked confidential, detailing safety violations and worker deaths in mining operations." A pause. "Reports that were never made public." This time the room reacted. Not loudly, but visibly, because patterns were forming, connections were building, and Kunle, though still calm, was no longer untouchable. "You've always been good with numbers," Tunde Kunle said, his tone almost conversational. "But stories, those are harder to control." Tunde stepped closer. "And lies are harder to sustain," he replied. A silence followed, heavy, charged. Then a voice from the back, weak, strained, but unmistakable. "He's telling the truth." Every head turned. The crowd parted slightly, and through the space, a man stepped forward. Injured, unsteady, but standing. Ibrahim's eyes widened. "Tunde," he whispered. Tunde turned, shock flashing across his face. "You're alive," he said. The man nodded faintly. "I didn't stay hidden," he said. "I couldn't." He stepped further into the light. "My name is Ibrahim Sadiq," he said, his voice gaining strength. "I worked as a driver for Adebayo Holdings." Cameras shifted again, focusing, recording. "I saw things," Ibrahim continued, "heard conversations, delivered documents I was never supposed to read." He looked directly at Kunle. "And I saw what he did." Kunle's jaw tightened slightly. Still composed, but no longer untouched. They told me to stay quiet, Ibrahim said, to forget, to move on. A pause, but people died. The words landed, hard, real, and impossible to ignore. Tunda stepped beside him. "You're not alone anymore," he said quietly. Ibrahim nodded, then turned back to the cameras. "I have copies," he said, "more than what's in that box." The room erupted. Questions, shouts, movement. Because now this was no longer one man's claim. It was a case, a real one. Kunle raised a hand slightly, and just like that, some of the noise quieted. Not completely, but enough. "Emotional stories," he said calmly. "Convenient timing, fabricated evidence." He looked at the journalists. "You want truth?" he asked. "Then look at the pattern." He gestured toward Tunda. "A man accused suddenly returns with documents no one can verify." Then, toward Ibrahim, "A witness who conveniently appears at the perfect moment." His voice remained steady, controlled, but no official confirmation, he added. No legal validation, a pause, and no authority. For a brief second, doubt entered the room. Not strong, but present, because power. Even when shaken, still carried weight. Soraya saw it, felt it, and stepped forward, before she fully realized she was moving. "You talk about authority," she said. Her voice cut through the space differently. Not polished, not practiced, but real, raw. Every eye turned to her. Kunle's gaze followed, curious now. "Who are you?" he asked. Soraya didn't hesitate. "I'm someone who has nothing to gain from lying," she said. A pause, and everything to lose from speaking. The room quieted again. Because truth, when spoken like that, carried differently. "They came to my home," she continued. "Men working for you." Kunle's expression didn't change. "They broke everything," she said, "threatened my child, left my mother without help." Her voice didn't rise, but it deepened. "You call this a story?" she asked. A silence. "Then this is what your power does." The words settled, not dramatic, not exaggerated, but undeniable. And for the first time, Kunle didn't respond immediately. Because this wasn't something he could dismiss with strategy. This was reality, visible, human, and standing in front of everyone. Then from outside, sirens, loud, approaching, real. The room shifted again, heads turned, and moments later, authorities entered, uniformed, official, unavoidable. Kunle's expression changed, not dramatically, but enough, because this was not something he could control, not anymore. The lead officer stepped forward. "Kunle Adebayo," he said, "you need to come with us." A pause, then added, "For questioning." The room held still, waiting, watching, because this was the moment. Kunle looked around, at the cameras, at the journalists, at Tunda, at Soraya, and for the first time, his silence carried something new. Not control, not certainty, but consequence. He didn't resist, didn't argue, because he knew the battle had shifted, and for now, he had lost this moment. As he was escorted out, cameras followed, voices rose again, but inside the room, something else remained. Not noise, not chaos, but release. Because for the first time, the truth had not been hidden. It had been seen and heard, and it could not be undone. Tunde stood still, the box still in his hands. But now he wasn't holding evidence. He was holding the end of something, and the beginning of something else. Beside him, Soraya, still standing, still steady. Because this fight was never just his. And now it never would be again. In the days that followed, the story refused to disappear. It moved faster than any storm across radio waves, television screens, and whispered conversations in markets and streets. What had begun in a forgotten storage unit in Tema had now reached places far beyond it, courtrooms, boardrooms, and government offices, where decisions shaped lives most people would never see. For the first time in a long time, people were asking questions. Not quietly, not cautiously, but openly. And that alone was a kind of shift. Tunde stood in the center of it all, but he was no longer running. Investigations moved quickly. The evidence from the metal box, combined with Ibrahim's testimony and additional records retrieved through emergency legal orders, began to form a pattern too clear to ignore. Accounts were frozen, transactions traced, names revealed. Kunle Adebayo's network, once untouchable, started to crack under pressure. Arrests followed. Not just Kunle. Others. Board members, managers, people who had hidden behind titles and signatures for years. Now they stood exposed. For Tunde, it was not victory, not yet, because clearing his name was only part of it. Rebuilding what had been broken, that was something else entirely. Back in Accra, Soraya sat outside a newly painted building, her hands resting in her lap. The sun was warm, but not harsh. The air carried something unfamiliar, calm. It had been weeks since that night in Tema, weeks since everything had changed. Her life no longer looked the same. The small wooden house she once called home was gone, demolished quietly as part of a redevelopment plan that had likely been set in motion long before any of this began. But this time she was not left with nothing. Tunde had insisted on helping. At first, Soraya resisted. "I don't need charity," she told him. "I'm not offering charity," he replied. "I'm correcting damage." There was a difference, and slowly she allowed it, not as a favor, but as a step forward. The building behind her was modest but solid. 2 rooms, clean walls, a proper roof that did not leak when it rained. It was not luxury, but it was dignity. Inside, Malik sat at a small table, writing carefully in a notebook. His school uniform was new, slightly oversized, but worn with pride. For the first time, he did not have to leave school early to help his mother. For the first time, he had time to learn. Mama Zainab rested inside, as well her condition improved under proper treatment. The lines of pain that once marked her face had softened, replaced by something quieter. Relief, not complete, but real. Soraya looked down at her hands. They were still the same hands, still worn, still marked by years of labor. But something had changed, not in what she had, but in what she knew. That survival was not the same as living. That silence did not protect. That choices, even the smallest ones, could shape something far beyond themselves. Footsteps approached. Soraya looked up. Tunde. He walked toward her without urgency, dressed simply, far from the polished image the world once knew. There were still traces of that life in him, but they no longer defined him. "You've been sitting out here a long time," he said. Soraya smiled faintly. "I like the quiet," she replied. He nodded. "So do I." A pause. Then he sat beside her. For a moment they said nothing, because words were no longer needed to fill space. "You didn't have to do all this," Soraya said after a while. Tunde looked at her. "Yes," he said. "I did." She turned slightly. Why he didn't answer immediately. "Because the truth wasn't simple. I built something that hurt people," he said finally, "even if I didn't see it at the time. It was still under my name." Soraya watched him. "And now I see it," he replied. A silence. Then, "And I can't unsee it." Soraya nodded slowly. "That's a heavy thing," she said. "Yes, but it's also clear." Another pause. Then Tunde added, "I'm setting up a fund." Soraya raised an eyebrow slightly. "For what? For women like you," he said. "Market traders, small vendors, people who carry entire families with almost nothing." Soraya let out a quiet breath. You think money fixes that, no, Tunde said. But access helps. She considered that. Then nodded once. Maybe. He looked at her. I don't want to just rebuild what was broken, he continued. I want to change what made it break in the first place. Soraya's gaze softened slightly. That takes more than money, she said. I know. Another silence. Then Malik's voice came from inside. Mama Look Soraya stood quickly, stepping inside. Malik held up his notebook, his face bright. I got all the answers right, he said proudly. Soraya smiled fully this time. I knew you would. Tunde stood in the doorway, watching. Not as a man above them, not as someone distant, but as someone present. Part of something real. Later that evening, as the sun dipped low and the sky softened into warm colors, Soraya stood outside again. This time not thinking about what she had lost, but about what had been built. Not perfectly, not completely, but honestly. Tunde stepped beside her once more. You're quiet again, he said. Soraya glanced at him, just thinking about what she looked out at the street, at the people passing, at the life continuing, that, sometimes she said slowly, everything changes because of one decision. Tunde followed her gaze. Yes, he said, and sometimes she added, that decision is not about what you gain. A pause, but who you become. Tunde nodded, because that, more than anything, was true. They stood there in silence, not because there was nothing to say, but because everything that mattered had already been lived. Sometimes the greatest battles in life do not begin with power, wealth, or control, but with a simple choice. A choice to help when it is easier to turn away. A choice to stand when it is safer to remain silent. Soraya had nothing, no money, no protection, no influence. And yet, in her smallest moment, she chose compassion. That one decision pulled her into danger, but it also revealed truth, exposed injustice, and changed lives far beyond her own. Tunde had everything once: status, control, respect. But it was only when he lost it all that he truly saw the world around him, not from above, but from within. And in that place he found something more valuable than power, purpose. Justice does not always come easily. Healing does not happen overnight. But when truth is faced, when courage meets honesty, change becomes possible. If this story moved you, take a moment to reflect. What would you have done in Soraya's place?
And more importantly, what choices are shaping your life right now? Share your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this story with someone who needs a reminder that even the smallest act of kindness can change everything.